The accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant occurred in March of 2011, yet the truth surrounding this profoundly man-made disaster has just barely begun to surface in the mainstream media.
It's still a ticking time bomb. If they have another aftershock and they're not in cold shutdown yet till next year, the accident could start all over again. In the last 2 weeks, everything we knew about that accident has been turned upside down. We were told 3 partial meltdowns, don't worry about it. Now we know it was 100% core melt in all 3 reactors. Radiation, minimal that was released. Now we know it was comparable to the radiation at Chernobyl. And as far as evacuation, 12 miles, that's it. You don't have to evacuate beyond 12 miles. Now they find hotspots, 4 hotspots outside the evacuation zone. 34,000 school children now have radiation badges when they go to school.
Kindergartners with radiation
badges. Down to 4 years of age. Can you imagine that? Kindergarten kids with radiation badges going to school.
Huge amounts of radiation escaped, about 3 times more than Chernobyl. And they were lucky because the wind was blowing from west to east across the Pacific. In Seattle, the ambient levels of radiation went up 40,000 times above normal. You got a fair fallout here. Vancouver did. The Cascades were littered with radiation, and in fact fallout fell right across America. Not huge amounts, but it did in Seattle.
It's very clear that there are substantial health questions that have to be addressed now. I'm particularly concerned about Unit 4. There are these 6 reactors. If, for example, you had an earthquake or a tsunami hit those particular pools, those pools could rupture. That could mean that the fuel rods could catch fire, melt down, and you'd have radiation in the air that would be a huge challenge to control.
The Japanese public has been demonstrating in the streets of Tokyo in massive numbers to let the world know that Fukushima is still in crisis. An international effort is urgently needed to address the ongoing nuclear disaster at Fukushima. What can you do to help? Stay informed. Tell your friends and spread the news by sharing this video. Contact newspapers, churches, and elected officials on the urgent need for an international effort to address this ongoing crisis. Fukushima, it's our problem now.
Moving on to the continuing nuclear crisis in Japan, a radioactive wave is headed toward the United States. Scientists with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are tracking debris from last year's Japanese earthquake and tsunami as it makes its way across the Pacific Ocean. That debris, which carries with it extremely high levels of radiation, is currently 186 miles off the coast of Japan and could start lashing the coast of the United States within the year, depending on the currents. Scientists are immediately concerned about marine life being hit with radiation levels millions of times above normal. But by next year, it'll be in our marine food supply, our rain, and our coastal waters. So more than a year after the Fukushima nuclear crisis began, the world is still suffering its effects, with more to come. But despite all that, the Japanese government is reportedly preparing to restart one of its nuclear reactors. This week, the Japanese Prime Minister will meet with cabinet officials to discuss turning on a nuclear reactor in western Japan that's been shut down since the Fukushima crisis began more than a year ago. So why hasn't the world learned the lessons of nuclear power yet, even as radioactive waste is headed toward the U.S. West Coast? Kevin Camps joins me now. He's the radioactive waste watchdog at beyondnuclear.org. Kevin, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom.
So what is going on here with the Japanese saying, I thought, last time we talked, in fact, I thought that the consensus in Japan was no nukes.
Well, there's strong citizen pressure to keep now 53 of 54 reactors in Japan shut down. There's only one operating commercial reactor in Japan. It's going to shut down in early May. Japan will be a nuclear-free zone, and it's because of the anti-nuclear movement of Japan, the common citizens of Japan who, because of Fukushima Daiichi, don't want those risks in their lives anymore. And what the government and the industry are worried about is if they enter the summer with no reactors online and people's lights are still on, the electricity supply is stable, the air conditioners are working, people are going to start to ask, why do we have these risks in our midst? So the federal government, as you said, is sending their Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry to Fukui Prefecture in western Japan to try to convince the governor there who wants
guys need a nuke
safety upgrades in place before the restart. That's kind of a reasonable request to just get out of the way. And the feds are hinting they may just override him at this point.
Whoa. Can these reactors be made safe?
No, I mean, if you lose electricity from the grid, if you lose the emergency diesels, as happened at Fukushima Daiichi, be it an earthquake and tsunami, be it some other natural disaster, Japan just in recent days was hit by another major storm. So there are many ways you can lose electricity to the safety systems, to the cooling systems.
Right.
And of course you've got...
It could be a tornado in the Midwest.
Floods in Nebraska last summer, which were much more serious than they ever let on at the time.
Yeah. This wave of radioactive waste, or what has become now this, I don't know the word, beachhead or whatever, this just plume, I guess is a pretty good word, that is coming off Japan and heading towards us. What is it? What does it mean?
Well, almost to the day a year ago, Tokyo Electric intentionally released 11,500 tons or 3 million gallons of radioactive water into the ocean on purpose. The federal government of Japan gave them permission. There's recent news media reports that it was under pressure from the United States government, and the excuse at the time...
Why?
The excuse at the time was that Tokyo Electric was out of storage space for radioactive water at the plant, and they had a lot more coming. They were trying to keep the reactors as cool as possible because of the meltdowns. They were clearing away less contaminated water to make room for much more contaminated water to come. That's the decision they made. And that plume, as you said, it's taken a year, but it's now reached Hawaii. Another year from now, it'll probably reach the west coast of the United States. And yes, those are our fishing waters, but the fish happen to move around. There are species of tuna that spend part of their life cycle on the Japanese northeast coast, and they have migrated to the United States already. So where is the food monitoring program? There is no post-Fukushima food monitoring program in place. It was quickly dismantled. We're back to pre-Fukushima radiation monitoring, which could miss a lot.
Get to Amazon.com right now and buy a Geiger counter? Is that our food monitoring program? You're on your own, Charlie?
In Japan, I just met a woman in New York City who's now an anti-nuclear activist, and her sisters, her nieces and nephews are monitoring their own food, monitoring the food at the elementary school, and bringing in Fukushima refugees. Amazing. So the people of Japan have been thrown onto their own resources to protect themselves.
And the people of the United States, apparently?
Very much so. We see that up and down the West Coast, people getting radiation monitors, even to the point of checking their own food supply.
Yeah. I actually bought, in fact, I brought it in one of the times you were here on the show. You visited the Fukushima plant back in 2010. We just have 20, 30 seconds left. Thoughts on that?
Well, it's a dead zone where I went to, and the wonderful people I met are scattered to the wind across Japan and other countries. I also visited Fukui. I went to a 1,200-year-old Buddhist temple, and they have been a strong leader in the resistance to those reactors that now are slated for restart.
That's great. Kevin, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
It's always great to see you, even though it's rough news. I appreciate it. It's time for a worldwide ban on the most expensive and the most dangerous form of electricity generation on Earth, nuclear power. No nuke.
On Tuesday, the Japanese government said it expected it would have to look at the international monitoring of radioactive fish products following the discovery of a tainted tuna caught off the coast of Southern California, but first needed more information. Low levels of nuclear radiation from the tsunami-damaged Fukushima power plant have turned up in bluefin tuna off the California coast, suggesting that these fish carried radioactive compounds across the Pacific Ocean faster than wind or water can. Japan's chief cabinet secretary said the government still needs more information on this issue.
We haven't really got hold of the research paper on this migrant tuna fish off the southern coast of California yet. We expect that we will have to deal with the issue of monitoring international fish product supplies, but we will need to gather more information before looking at how to deal with this issue.
Scientists reported on Monday small amounts of cesium-137 and cesium-134 were detected in 15 tuna caught near San Diego in August 2011, about 4 months after these chemicals were released into the water off Japan's east coast.
As far as domestic fish products are concerned, the Ministry of Fisheries has reached out to not only Fukushima Prefecture, but to the relevant associations in fisheries, cooperatives, and has set up a monitoring system. And from this year, they are planning to start research and monitor movements of radioactive material from the seawater and from the ocean floor to fish products.
Japan said it will continue the research and monitor the effects of the radioactive material released into the ocean found around Fukushima since the March 11, 2011 tsunami that crippled and caused a meltdown at the reactors owned by Tokyo Electric Company. Researchers said in a study published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that the amount of radioactive cesium found in the fish off California isn't thought to be damaging to people if consumed, but the findings are expected to cause a stir amongst sushi aficionados around the world. Judging by the size of the bluefin tuna the U.S. scientists sampled, the researchers knew these were young fish and had left Japanese water about a month after the accident. Most of the radiation was released over a few days in April 2011. And unlike some other compounds, radioactive cesium doesn't quickly sink to the sea bottom, but remains dispersed in the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. Jessica Minton, IB Times TV.
It is the 28th of the 8th, 2012, and this is today's climate change update. Let's go ahead and get started. Hurricane Isaac is making landfall as I make this video at 4:03 p.m. Central Time. It is due on track to go right up through New Orleans, so definitely keep an eye on radar. The eye is heading directly for the sinkhole. SOT.net, family food bills to soar as British shoppers face paying more for bread, pasta, and meat. Here we go, we've been warning you about the food shortages that are up and coming. Chinese fishermen killed as typhoon hits South Korea. At least 5 Chinese fishermen have been killed and 10 others are missing after their boats capsized as Typhoon Bolivan hit South Korea, officials say. Tornado in Guatemala causes some damage, and they've got some videos out on that. Tornado hits southern Maryland, more possible along with flooding. We've got a series of storms heading up the east coast. It's been a turbulent day that started with a band of heavy rain lined up on the west side of the Chesapeake Bay during Annapolis before dawn. There was a short break, but the storms began spinning up rapidly around lunchtime. Literally, please note that the storm does not have to have a warning to be deadly. California earthquake swarm. What's going on? And the swarm is continuing. A swarm of earthquakes that touched off Sunday morning in the Southern California is still rolling along Monday afternoon, registering more than 300 small to moderate quakes that could be felt from Arizona to San Diego. The swarm is unusual, but not as rare as you might think. And they go into explaining that, and there's all kinds of videos out on that right now. Cyclone slams into Italy, brings tornadoes. Cyclone's just another word for a typhoon or hurricane. Cyclone Beatrice struck the northern Italy on Sunday, causing light flooding, storms, and mini tornado, but also providing much-needed cooling after a week-long heat wave. And farmers and vineyards hampered by the drought look forward to Beatrice, which succeeded Lucifer, an anticyclone with winds that spiral out from a high-pressure center, which had brought hot air in from the Sahara Desert. Another strong earthquake shakes eastern Indonesia. They're saying this one's a little deep, 6.4 magnitude. Heavy rains double the size of sinkhole in downtown Baltimore. Parts of Maryland are still getting drenched. Thunderstorms dumped up to 5 to 6 inches of rain, making it one of the wettest days of 2012. They've got a huge sinkhole in downtown expanding. Record ice melt opens new sea routes in the Arctic. Scientists say the Arctic sea ice is likely to shrink to its smallest recorded size sometime next week. The ongoing thaw has opened up new sea lanes to shipping, with a Chinese icebreaker recently becoming the first ship to cross the Arctic Ocean from China to Iceland. And they're already fighting over the mineral rights under this thing, and, you know, post-glacial rebound. Scott with Bug, look into it. Thousands of Serb villagers evacuated as wildfires rage unabated. Serbia evacuated thousands of villagers on Saturday and called in the army to help fight wildfires raging through the drought-hit Western Balkans. Over to the extinction protocol. Powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake strikes off the coast of El Salvador. They didn't issue any tsunami alerts or whatnot to that. Very volcanically active area. And their California earthquake swarm story. Massive typhoon Bolivan slams Okinawa, Japan, and heads up for the Koreas. And of course the Isaac warnings. Over to the RSOE quick. Of course the earthquake swarm in California. Flash flooding still remains in Pakistan. Got flash flood reports out of Charleston, South Carolina. They've gotten a few inches of rain in a little time, expecting 2 to 4 more. Flooded out cars, people needed rescued, that kind of thing. Event into space. Wales, United Kingdom. They're saying about a golf ball sized meteorite fell and exploded over the skies of England. Not too very long ago. Bright light in the sky with a green trail, that kind of thing. Of course, the forest fires in Montana and Idaho. The channel Warning 616, she's putting out some outstanding videos on the wildfires going on in Idaho right now, and they are heading, skipping over across the border into Montana. And tornadoes out of Vero Beach, Florida. And I'm sure that has to do with Isaac. And a few more stories on and on, that kind of thing. Let's go over to the nuclear stuff, ENA News. Head of Fukushima thyroid exams. I'm trying to help, quote, so that Japan as a country will not fall apart. Lawsuits over health effects would victimize all Japanese. So they're saying, please don't sue TEPCO or the Japanese government, who is the top owner of TEPCO at the moment. All these lawsuits will cripple the Japanese government. And even the Soviet Union, when it crumbled, they didn't blame it on capitalism. They blamed it on Chernobyl. The cost, the cost of Chernobyl is what brought about the downfall of the Soviet Union. Isaac upgraded to hurricane strength. Eye of the storm is headed for sinkhole. Assumption Paris now under mandatory evacuation order. So there's a lot going on there. I'd definitely be getting out of the area, even if it's only a Category 1 hurricane in hurricane country. TEPCO, dozens of pieces of rubble found in fuel rod assembly removed from Fukushima number 4 unit. And with all the explosions and whatnot going on around the spent fuel pool, it's no wonder they're finding debris at the bottom. Did any of these racks break up and fall to the bottom of the pool, as has been reported? Japan newspaper, hospitals refuse to treat Fukushima plant workers. Guess they don't want them on the books. Radiation expert, there are immediate radiation dose concerns from the sinkhole in Louisiana. The government's in denial. They don't know what to do about the radioactive contamination. And now they've got a hurricane and a severe low pressure pushing down on top of the already unstable ground. Chemical expert, residents will be exposed to extremely dangerous alpha radiation coming from the sinkhole in Louisiana. Radioactive dust inhaled after carried by wind, surface water. They're saying this thing gets aerated with the water, and when it evaporates on the roads and the trucks roll over the roads, and that creates the dust and kicks it up and people breathe it in, that's all going to be radioactive. And the government's not really sure what they can do about that. Forbes, untold number of endangered whales intervene in California nuclear plant testing. I forget the name of it, one of the nuclear plants in California. They're doing some seismic testings because they've discovered they've built this thing on 2 fault lines or very close to 2 fault lines. And they want to do the air gun, you know, where they shoot and get the seismic readings just to see how deep these faults go, kind of thing. And a large number of endangered whales have come up in the area, and these tests will hurt and scare the whales, and it's been known to kill them, so they put off testing due to the whales coming in. So is it the whales protesting the nuclear industry as well? They need to shut them all down, every single one of them. WSJ Market Watch, cancer was bound to happen to animals grazing 5 miles downwind of Connecticut nuclear power plant. None of these plants are safe. Governor says more boom being deployed in sinkhole, winds up to 100 miles an hour is expected in the area. All monitors within the community are being removed, hence the mandatory evacuation. Texas brine is in hurricane mode. Well, let's figure out what that is exactly. Gunderson on gamma rays implies rubble was activated by neutrons, or that activation products like cobalt-60 are in the rubble. Interesting. And finally today I'm going to take you over to Daily News Fukushima Diary. SAITAMA Prefecture is going to start recycling disaster debris to cement. More houses will be built from radioactive concrete. 3 local governments in Saitama are going to accept disaster debris to recycle into cement. In one of the cities, the city mayor died of mitochondrial infarction, or a heart attack, 2 days after attending a test of incinerating of this debris. 4 prefectures ended up building final disposal sites of highly radioactive waste within their lands. Radiation still keeps leaking from the Fukushima plants. We've been telling you this over and over. The small country of Japan is becoming full of radioactive waste. They're starting to have defined final disposal sites somewhere. And thyroid tests to be conducted out of Fukushima. Government can no longer ignore it. The Japanese government is finally starting to realize that the actual Fukushima effect, 4 months have already passed since they found out about 1 in 3 children have a thyroid problem in Fukushima. And they are still attempting to cover this up. It's a lot worse than we are even getting these little hints of. And it goes on and on and on, of course. If I've missed anything, please let me know. Attach your comments or videos below. Enjoy while you can, everybody. Thanks.
The government is going to study the effects of radiation on people affected by the accident at the plant. Fukushima residents have been expressing concerns over possible genetic effects from radioactive substances. The Environment Ministry will conduct blood and other tests in the next fiscal year. Ministry officials say they'll work with Fukushima Medical University and research institutions. Their first priority will be to test children.
The health of Fukushima residents needs to be monitored for more than 50 years.
No shit.
Understanding the influence of radiation on the genetic level will help prepare us for the future.
Workers say water levels inside reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant have fallen below the necessary level twice. They say there is no immediate threat to safety. Officials at Tokyo Electric Power Company found the coolant levels of 3 reactors fell on Thursday to about 10% below what's necessary. They added more water to return levels to normal. TEPCO officials again noticed the water fell below standard, and again they filled up the reactors. They suspect something may be wrong with 2 pumps on higher ground that sent decontaminated water back in. They're now using spare pumps. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda declared last December that all the plant's reactors were in a stable condition.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has agreed to help Fukushima Prefecture rebuild itself. The International Atomic Energy Agency has agreed to help Fukushima Prefecture rebuild itself.
It's another bullshit experiment.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has agreed to help Fukushima Prefecture rebuild itself after last year's nuclear accident. Agency staff will assist with decontamination measures and health checks. IAEA Director General Yukiya Amano met Fukushima Governor Yuhei Sato at the agency's headquarters in Vienna on Friday. Sato asked for help with efforts to deal with the damage from the accident at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. The IAEA chief said his agency will send staff and foreign experts to Fukushima. He said the problem is not a local one, but global.
The IAEA support will bring a sense of security to Fukushima residents. We expect we'll be able to carry out a joint project with the IAEA while consulting with experts from around the world.
Agency and prefectural officials plan to draw up a detailed plan of action as soon as possible.
Childhood dreams are too often just that, fleeting passions that are forgotten with time. But here's one man who never let go. Fukushima officials are looking for investors to help the prefecture's recovery from last year's disasters. Local government leaders flew to Germany to seek businesses willing to back their latest projects. The officials held an event in Düsseldorf to promote investment in renewable energy. Governor Yuhei Sato introduced a plan to build a research facility for wind and solar power.
I hope you will support Fukushima as it pursues its recovery.
His achievement is a dream that about 100 officials from German and Japanese companies attended the event. Many expressed interest in a solar power project in Fukushima's Kawauchi village. It's being built by German and Japanese firms.
We're positive about investing in Japan. They recently introduced a system requiring power companies to buy renewable energy at fixed rates, so there's lots of potential for the industry to grow.
Before the event, Governor Sato inspected a decommissioned nuclear power plant in western Germany. He was briefed on the decommission process and the problems the engineers encountered. And today stokes the imaginations of thousands.
Japanese officials want to make sure that people isolated by disasters have enough to eat and drink. The Agriculture Ministry has included proposals for emergencies in a draft of new food security guidelines. Survivors of last year's March 11th disaster had a pretty hard time finding food and water because of the quake and tsunami had crippled transportation networks. The ministry officials adopted a plan in the new guidelines to deal with the situation for the first time. The general plan calls on national and local governments to cooperate with the private sector to create backup distribution networks. It also says greater effort should be made to advise households to store food. The emergency guidelines call on farmers near disaster areas to send food aid even if it doesn't meet the usual standards for shipment. They also call on ports and airports to enhance quarantine systems to facilitate food imports. The ministry plans to finalize the guidelines as early as next month.
Welcome back, and we're joined again with Tim Alexander with Chris Harris. Chris, you've got some amazing reports to tell us what's going on. What's happening?
Well, we did discuss last week about whether they actually pulled the two new fuel assemblies from the Fukushima Unit 4 spent fuel pool. Actually, it's not a spent fuel pool. They're in their own storage area. So it wasn't indicative of what's going on in the spent fuel pool. That's where you store new fuel.
The IAEA is also calling for renewed monitoring of North Korea's nuclear program. It says it's concerned about recent construction activities at a nuclear complex in Yongbyon, where a light water nuclear reactor is being built. The IAEA says satellite images show a dome has been built over one of the buildings in the complex. They say this indicates the presence of components such as a reactor inside the building. Experts say once the light water reactor goes online, it could be used to extract plutonium from spent nuclear fuel. IAEA officials were allowed to inspect the Yongbyon complex following the 2007 agreement reached during six-party talks on the North's nuclear program, but they were ordered to leave the country in 2009.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad read out the leader's closing statement. The statement says all nations should have the right to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. It criticizes U.S. leaders for their economic sanctions on Syria, and it denounces Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Ahmadinejad urged the leaders of the non-aligned countries to work together to fundamentally change the international order. The leaders plan to meet again in Venezuela in 2015.
I think it's important to laugh at these people as much as fear them. They are pathetic. They are laughable. They say ridiculous things that are just so far out there that if they were said in any other context, people would be laughing at them. But because they're the government, it's supposed to be taken seriously. Oh, pizza is a vegetable now. Oh, okay. Tell me more, Mr. Government.
The government is going to study the effects of radiation on people affected by the accident at the plant. Fukushima residents have been expressing concerns over possible genetic effects from radioactive substances. The Environment Ministry will conduct blood and other tests in the next fiscal year. Ministry officials say they'll work with Fukushima Medical University and research institutions. Their first priority will be to test children.
The health of Fukushima residents needs to be monitored for more than 50 years. Understanding the influence of radiation on the genetic level will help prepare us for the future.